Hi, guys. I am here today to talk to you about a very sensitive subject. So, I hope that if this is something that hits close to home to you, that you will understand that I am coming from a place of having been there myself and a place of wanting to help you heal as well as helping me heal. So, this is not a light, funny post like some of mine have been. This is more I want you to understand and feel heard, validated, um, comforted in knowing that you're not alone and learning how to start the process of acknowledging that you were abused, understanding that just because you were does not make you bad or there's nothing wrong with you, and understanding that once you acknowledge it, you can learn to take the steps to move on. So I hope that you can stay with me for a little bit as I go through this. I will try to go as quickly as possible, but I don't want it to be so fast that it doesn't do justice to what needs to be talked about. So I am listening to, well, first let me back up. I have been going to a cranial sacral therapist who does a lot with emotions to release the negative energy, the toxins, the feelings that we experience that cause our body to physically have health issues. So I know that a lot of people may think this is juju, fake, not legit, but I can guarantee you from my personal experience that my physical illnesses have recently been being caused by my emotional trauma. So I've been working with him on trying to heal myself a step at a time, and he referred me to this book that's called It Wasn't Your Fault. And it talks about having self-compassion to be able to heal ourselves. So I've been wanting to talk about it for a while. I'll show you what the cover looks like in case you want to go listen to it or read it yourself. But I did not want to do this until I felt like I got a better grasp and understanding of how to acknowledge it and how to move forward. So first of all, I want to address that if you experienced abuse in any form in your life, there's a couple things I want to express right up front. One, you may have experienced it at the same time as somebody else, like say a sibling, a friend, maybe parent, child, because maybe the other parent was the abuser. So you may have experienced abuse at the same time, even in similar ways, but that does not mean that you're going to have had the same feelings, and it's not going to affect you the same as it affected somebody else. Somebody else may be able to work through it faster than you. They may take longer to work through it. So don't compare yourself to someone else just because you think, well, they also experienced it. We're all individuals, and this is not about, oh, well, they had it worse than me, or they experienced it the same and I'm not handling it the way they are. It's not about that. It's about you and learning and acknowledging that it happened and how to move on. So the second thing is that I wanted to address is acknowledging it. All too often, society tells us that we just need to buck up and push past. It happened. Let's not talk about it. It's in the past. There's a difference in talking about it in a negative way, just to get attention, just to vent. And there's a way that's talking about it is to heal. And if we don't talk about it and we don't allow it to come out and to heal us, it's going to physically manifest like it has been in me. And it is going to cause you to not be the best you that you could be. So the next thing that I want to discuss is how to acknowledge it. Oftentimes, when we acknowledge that we've been a victim of abuse, people think, maybe we think that people are going to feel or think about us in a different way. They're going to think we're dirty. They're going to think we're ugly. They're going to think we're used. They're going to think we're not as good as them. They're going to put us over here when maybe we want to be over here. So a lot of times we're afraid to acknowledge it because we feel like if we acknowledge that we were a victim of abuse, that makes us weak. That makes us just different. And nobody wants to feel that way. So I want you to know that just because you acknowledge that does not make you those things. I thought that for a long time. And so it took me a long time to acknowledge that, yes, this did happen to me. And I need to acknowledge that so I can move past that. Okay. So once you've learned to acknowledge it and realize it did happen and it was abuse, then the next thing I want you to know is how to recognize that it was abuse. So I loved how in this book, the author talks about if you were to tell a story to someone else in like this, for instance, there once was a little girl, blah, 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 right? Okay. So if you were to tell your story like that, and you were just the listener to that story, would you realize that it was abuse? Or would you be like, oh yeah, that's totally normal. Oh yeah, that's legit. That's cool. Or would you be like, oh my gosh, I have empathy. I hurt for that little child. You have compassion for that child, or that teenager, or that woman, or that man, or whatever age. If you would listen to that story and then realize, wow, like your heartstrings are just tugging and wanting to reach out and embrace that person and let them know that they're loved and they're cared for, then it's abuse. Okay, you guys? So I loved that she talked about that, because I thought oftentimes we brush aside the abuse and tell ourselves, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It was my fault. I deserved it. I was a bad kid. I was a bad wife. I was a bad girlfriend. I was a bad teenager, whatever the case. We just brush it off because it's harder to acknowledge than to push aside. And so we do that for a long time. But I want you guys to realize, as I'm realizing, that until we come to accept it and know that it wasn't your fault, no matter what you did, it was not your fault. Okay. And that took me a long time to realize, because I thought, well, I was a naughty kid. I backtalked. I did things that I shouldn't have. So I deserved it. You guys, nobody in this world deserves abuse. Nobody. I don't care how bad you were. I don't care the stupid choices you made. You don't deserve abuse. You may deserve to be disciplined. You may deserve to be stopped, like if you're hurting others or things like that. But there's ways to do it without being abused. So I hope you can understand that. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about is why it's so important that we get over it, other than the physical aspects. But I've started to realize I'm doing this in my own life, is that we tend to allow our abuse to seep into our relationships with other people. So when we see somebody else that's maybe having something that's a trigger for us, so maybe we see our child being yelled at by somebody, we automatically, all those feelings come back up and we just, mama bear, right? You rage. Well, then what happens? We end up becoming the abuser again, because we end up screaming, yelling, hurting the person who is maybe raising their voice to our child or spanking our child or whatever the case, okay? So it's important that we learn to clear that out of ourselves so that we don't reenact those things and end up becoming the abuser ourselves. Because then what happens? Then not only do we have the shame of being abused and the embarrassment and all those other things that come along with it, but then we're starting to experience that in a different way, because now we are ashamed that we're doing it to others. We're humiliated. We don't know how to stop. So that makes us more angry. That makes us more frustrated. And it just fuels the abuse. So, okay, so now we talked about several things, and I want to discuss how we can get over this. Okay. And obviously this is not a fix-all. This is an introduction to hopefully helping you know where to go from there. So what I've been learning is that we need to acknowledge it. We need to go back to that time of the abuse as we are now. Okay. So my abuse was most of it was when I was under 21. So I need to go back to that time period, and I need to be able to walk myself through the experiences that I went through as a child. Now I need to do it with compassion. I need to do it with validation. I need to do it with love, with empathy. I need to acknowledge what happened, but yet walk myself through as a little child. So let me just demonstrate. Hopefully it's not too weird for you guys, but and I don't want to get too personal because I do have family that will watch this, I'm sure, and I don't want them to feel offended or like I'm trying to hurt them in any way, because I'm not. So I don't want to share a personal experience, so I will make believe one. But say that maybe you were beat by your mother, and as your mother beat you, you told yourself all these things like, I deserve to be beat, I mouthed off to her, I was naughty, I stayed out too late, whatever the case. Okay, say you're a 15-year-old girl. And so while you're in the middle of being beat, you're telling yourself why you deserve to be beat. You're belittling yourself, and validating why it's okay for your parent to do that, because otherwise you cannot possibly comprehend why they would be hurting you in such a way. So we as adults need to go back to that time as a child, and we need to basically talk her through that and say, honey, you don't deserve this. Yeah, you made some choices that weren't very wise. Maybe you stayed out past your curfew, but what you're experiencing is not your fault. And you don't deserve to have gone through this. However, going through this is going to make you a stronger person, a better person, a more loving, more empathetic, more kind person. And have compassion for that little girl, that teenage girl. Love her, validate her, let her know that she's heard. And truly, when you do that, when you close your eyes and you do that and do it out loud, find a quiet place, do it out loud, you guys, it is so incredibly healing to get through. I've done it 3 or 4 times now, and it's been incredible to be able to get through experiences that I thought I would never be able to get through before. So take the time to do that. My phone is out of storage space, so I'm going to wrap this up, but read the blog post that goes along with this. I will give a little bit more detail, and I hope that as I go through this, I will be able to bring more to you so that this can be a healing process for all of us, and it won't just be a one-time blog post that you watch, that you read, and you're done, but that we'll be able to heal together and maybe strengthen each other, share experiences that we have gone through together, and maybe become better people because of that. Thanks, guys.